Today I'm going to introduce a game called Multiplication Battleship. In Multiplication Battleship, it is very similar to the actual game of Battleship if you've ever played it, the plastic one with the little ships that you're trying to find. In this version of the game, though, we use a multiplication chart instead of a grid-spaced board with the letters and the numbers. So I've made a player 1 and a player 2 version. In the actual game of Battleship, you don't want the other player to see your board because then they can see where your battleships are hiding, and that defeats the purpose of you being able to find them. So you could play this on clipboards or behind a screen so that way neither of you could see it. So the first step in playing the game is to place your ships. So you have 5 different ships to place. You have a aircraft carrier, which takes up 5 spaces, a battleship that takes up 4 spaces, a submarine and a destroyer that both take up 3 spaces, and a patrol boat that takes up 2 spaces. So you're going to go onto your board. Player 1 is going to use green to place theirs, and player 2 is going to use pink. So they would place their ships in a straight line, either vertically or horizontally, because the ships can't be L-shaped or curved. So they just choose places where they're going to hide their ships in the hopes that the other player won't find them. So my aircraft carrier, I need a patrol boat that's only 2. One of these, one here, and we'll put the other one way up at the top. The other player would do the same thing, and they would continue the game after they've located where their ships are going to be. You are not supposed to tell anyone where you've put your ships, so that way they can attempt to find them. Now, using the multiplication table is slightly different than using the grid-shaped based game that you would have grown up playing. Your job is to use a multiplication statement in order to try and locate the ships. Down here you have a smaller version of this grid that is your guesses box for the opponent's players, because you don't want to have to write over all of yours. You could keep track of their guesses on your grid if that's something that you like to do, which is something I like to do. So, for example, if I were to be player 1, and player 1 is making their guess about where player 2 has placed their ships, they might say, I think you might have a ship at 5 times 5. So I'm first going to go, as my instructions say, 5 to the right, then 5 down. So 5 times 5 would be 25. I'm going to say the multiplication statement to practice my multiplication fact. 5 times 5 makes 25. And they would say on their 5 times 5 that I've missed, because there is nothing sitting at their 5 times 5 square of 25. So I can go onto my little board. I could use 2 colors if that's something that you'd like to do. I could make a hit color and a miss color. I prefer using colors because it's a visual reminder of what's going on. So a hit color and a miss color, but you could just use the letters H and M, or you could put a check mark and an X if that makes more sense to you. And I would say, oh, sorry, my miss color is purple. They've told me that 5 times 5 is a miss, so I'm going to color in my little square so that I know that I do not have there is not a boat sitting there. Then the other player would have a turn and they would guess as well. They might say, I think maybe yours is 7 times 3, which is 7 to the right, 3 down. 7 times 3 makes 21. I'd look 7 times 3 and I'd say, nope, that's a miss. They could choose to do, perhaps theirs is a check mark for a hit and a X for a miss. And so they'll go to 7 times 3 and they'll put an X. That's not there. And the game would continue until you have sunk your battleships on the opponent's play board. So, for example, if player 1 now continues and says, I think you have a ship at 4 times 2, 4 times 2 is here, 4 times 2. They do have a ship there at 4 times 2. So they would say hit, and I would come over here and I would say 4 times 2, there's a hit. I would continue that way until perhaps I've guessed the entire ship. They would say, you've just sunk my ship. Perfect, this ship is sunk. That's the whole ship. You might want to write it down. You may want to guess which ship it is. You could say, oh, is it your submarine or your destroyer? And maybe you mark off which one you've got. Your job is to continue until you've found all of their ships, sunk in their ships, and practice as many multiplication facts as you can.